Let me just assure you now, even before we get into this, it's really not that big of a deal. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Pam. It's wonderful to meet you. If you're not new here, welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to answer the burning question: what the is that yellow mold in my plants? So the simple answer to that is it's not mold, it's fungus. Specifically a saprophytic fungus, and I'm going to attempt the name here. It's Leucocoprinus burnbaumii. I'll put it on the screen for you if you want to look up a little bit more into it. But I did some research for you guys, so we're going to go through this. We're going to talk about what it is, does it hurt your plants, and how to get rid of it, and should you get rid of it? Spoiler alert, the answer to that isn't necessarily yes. So let's talk about what causes this fungus to begin with. How does it get into your plants? You might just have a plant for a year and then all of a sudden you look into the pot and there's these little yellow clusters. Sometimes it just looks very flat against the surface, and then other times it's grown an actual fruit, a mushroom. This can really freak you out the first time that you see it, but let me just assure you now, even before we get into this, it's really not that big of a deal. So the spores of this fungus can come along in a contaminated potting mix, and it needs the right conditions to pop up and start multiplying. So if you have your soil sitting moist and damp for a while, particularly in the warm, more humid months, you could end up with these mushrooms, this fungus, popping up in your soil if you're overwatering it to begin with, if there isn't a lot of good drainage. But sometimes you've just got contaminated soil. Maybe your soil sat wet for a little too long on a moist day, and that was all it took. So let me explain to you a little bit about the relationship between plants, soil, and fungus so that maybe I can ease your fears about what this is doing and whether or not it's harming your plant.
Warning, I'm only medium smart.
Fungus and plants have what's called a symbiotic relationship. You may remember that from your high school biology classes. We're actually doing that in homeschool right now, and I've been able to use my plants as an example for things multiple times. It's been really fun. Anyway. So you may know that plants use photosynthesis to turn carbon into sugars. Those sugars basically feed the fungi in the soil, and then in turn, the fungi, being open organisms, are able to leach nutrients like nitrogen and phosphate back into the soil, which in turn is absorbed by the plants. It's also somewhat recently been found that plants can even send nutrients through the fungi network to other plants in the area that may need them. This chemical communication also extends to warnings of incoming danger, such as pests. And you heard me right on that. Plants can up their pest defenses when they are alerted that a pest is nearby. So beyond communicating with plants and breaking down essential nutrients and then feeding them back into the soil, fungus can also literally absorb the ammonium in the soil and lower the pH level, and this gives the plant even more access to nitrogen. So while overwatering can cause this fungus to pop up, a lot of times it's just a sign of a healthy ecosystem within your soil. It should be said, do not eat this. You don't want to eat this. It will not hurt your pets, your children, unless they are literally taking a spoon and just going ham on the fruit of the mushroom and stuff. But for the most part, touching it, you know, getting rid of the dirt if you want to, being around it, breathing around it, you're fine. So this fungus can look a little different plant to plant. The color can go from like a white to a yellow. And when the actual mushroom comes up, that is actually the fruit of the plant, whereas the fungus will be more of a blanket of yellow. So I have some plants here that I'm going to show you. I'm going to cut in some B-roll so that you can see it up close. This is my Begonia autumn Ember. This plant will be coming up in a Where Are They Now unboxing update, so stay tuned for that. So I'm not going to show you too much of her majesty, but she does have this fungus. Now, I had a bag of contaminated soil at some point. I do believe it was my Pro Mix, and I've gotten bags of it since then and have had no issues. So I think I don't think it's something that can entirely be prevented. And I'm not really that worried about it. So just remember that each little pot of soil that you have in your house has become in its own way a small little ecosystem. It can tell you if something is wrong, if something is overpopulating, like perhaps this fungus. Let's say you're like, Pam, we're cool, I like you, but I don't give a shit how good this stuff is for my plant. I want it out of there. I hear you. It's a little freaky to look at. And frankly, I found that it forms a bit of an impenetrable layer on top of my plants sometimes, and I just need to get it out of there so that I can water them a little bit more effectively. So here's what you can do. You can either repot the plant entirely, but we know that that's not always an option and it's not always ideal in the wintertime. So what you can do is take a spoon or something like that and just take the top 2 to 3 inches right out of the soil, get rid of that soil and try to replace it with some sterile soil, which hopefully your bag of soil will be sterile, but you know, shit happens clearly. Make sure that you always discard the mushrooms. Those are the fruit of the plant and you're likely to have a lot more reproduction if you just let that thing hang around. If you do want to go hardcore and just remove all the soil, go ahead and get as much off as you can very gently with your hands. You can use a little bit of water pressure, but be very careful to sort of rinse the roots off, or you can put it into a bucket of water. I found that's a little bit more gentle. Depending on the roots that you're dealing with. If they're thicker roots, they can probably handle a little water pressure. But you just want to get rid of as much of the soil as possible. It only takes one little spore for this to just rebloom again, and then you'll just be back to square one. If you decide that you want to give it a shot and try to get rid of it, that's the most effective way probably to get rid of it. And then from there, and then even if you don't want to replace your soil, the best thing you can do is just make the conditions a little less favorable for the fungi growth. You don't want to have your soil sitting wet, like I said. You want to make sure it's well draining. Air circulation is really effective in getting rid of any kind of mold or fungus or anything that grows in that sort of stagnant, moist condition. That said, I would not take a fan and turn it onto a big fresh crop of fungus because you may just blow the spores all over the place. So keep that in mind. If you want to make sure that your pots are not transferring this fungus, you want to use a 1:10 ratio of bleach to clean them. Just use 1 part bleach, 10 parts water, and just kind of let it soak for a little bit, and that should take care of anything. And that's just good practice in general. I admit that I don't always do that, but it really is a good practice to really clean your pots out before you repot them. You just never know. It's better safe than sorry. So that's it, friends. That's what I have for you about fungus in your plants. It's not really that big of a deal. It can just be a sign of a nice, healthy ecosystem. We're all using organic potting soil, so you gotta expect some organic matter to be in it. So if you did get something from this video, I would love to hear it down below. Do you have fungus in your plants? Let's talk it out. Let's figure it out. If you found this helpful, share it with your friends, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much. And today, we're going to talk about what that weird yellow fungusy we just started. I look dry. Okay. Light out of the shot here, Chief. Why does everything look bad all of a sudden? Okay, whatever. We're going with it. Going with it. Soil and lower the pH level 2 to 3 inches right out of the soil. What the hell was that noise? I didn't eat any edibles today. So, why are you turning purple? It is for your plants. I haven't been looking at the camera the whole time, have I?